Today is Thursday, October 2nd, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. The government is closed for business. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe, give us a rating, all that good stuff. You can email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're here getting through the news of the day together each and every weekday, bright and early. Glad you're here with us. And with me today, CBN's Trey Phillips. And we have a lot to get to, as always, on the focus story, growing human eggs in a lab. What's up with this?
Yeah, it's a disturbing story. Most disturbing is how far they got in the process. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
All right, details on that coming up in a moment. On the main thing, a wild story. Police hunt down a man and arrest him at his home over a tweet. Billy and Raj will have more on that story on the main thing. All right, make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts. You can find those links right there in the description. We put them in each and every Quick Start episode down there, so make sure you're checking those out. Also, make sure you're praying through the news of the day with us and with other like-minded believers at faithwire.substack.com. And if you haven't already, share this podcast with somebody. If you're here with us every day listening, we appreciate you. Help grow our community here. Share the podcast with a friend. We'd appreciate that. All right, we are going to head over to the news now in 90 seconds. And a hurricane tears into the Outer Banks. At least 6 North Carolina beach houses collapsed straight into the ocean as hurricanes Humberto and Imelda churned offshore. 5 homes in Buxton gave way on Tuesday, with a 6th toppling overnight. Dramatic footage shows houses swaying on stilts before crashing into the surf. Thankfully, no one was inside the homes when they fell, according to the National Park Service. And thankfully, both hurricanes stayed offshore, even though their winds and waves pounded the southern U.S. coast. Now, the U.S. government is officially shut down. A Senate vote to keep things running collapsed after Democrats blocked a temporary funding bill. At the heart of the fight, nearly $1 trillion in proposed Medicaid cuts over the next decade, along with restrictions on the president's spending powers. Republicans argued the shutdown belongs to Democrats, while Democrats accused President Trump of playing games with Americans' livelihoods. The impact is immediate. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers have been furloughed. Some troops are working without pay. National parks closed. Delays for passports, visas, food assistance programs, etc. Lawmakers, though, they continue to receive their paychecks. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And Trey, obviously, this shutdown, everyone just plays the blame game. I wanted to point to something a little bigger than this. I didn't have enough time to get to it there in the 90-second news segment, but wonder if you saw this. An extraordinary act of forgiveness. This is interesting, and it's causing a lot of discussion. A Mormon family launched a fundraiser for the wife and child of church shooter Thomas Sanford. He killed 4 and wounded 8 and then burned down that LDS chapel in Michigan. Well, David Butler, who's a Mormon, and he has no ties to the family at all, he set up the effort citing his faith, saying Sanford's family now faces financial hardship and deep trauma. The campaign has raised about 40% so far of its $500,000 goal, with donors leaving notes about choosing love and healing over vengeance, choosing forgiveness instead of that. This is an interesting one.
Yeah, it's for sure encouraging, right, to see, and there are a lot of dynamics at play, but to see that kind of forgiveness lived out, I think is jarring to people, right, especially to secular people who don't have any sort of understanding of God or are not Christians and don't know the call to forgive that we have, that we remember that vengeance is the Lord. It's not is the Lord's. It's not on us to take those things, that we grieve differently. We mourn as those who have hope. We don't mourn as those without hope. So all of that taken into consideration, it just reminds me even of Erica Kirk and saying from the stage at Charlie's memorial that she forgives the man who assassinated her 31-year-old husband, father of 2. So I think these kinds of stories are impactful, and they're important because they give us an opportunity to share the light and the hope of the gospel. Now, these are people who are of the Mormon religion, so it's a bit different there, of course, but it's still, I think, gives us as Christians the opportunity to have similar conversations with our unbelieving friends and family members.
Right. And of course, there's a lot of overlap there. But, when they say scripture, obviously Mormons have a different set of scriptures in addition to the Bible. So there's a lot of differences there between an evangelical Christian and a Mormon. And those differences are talked about a lot. And that's not our intention here. Those are for a different time, different place. But nevertheless, the act is definitely a thought-provoking one and one that points to forgiveness. Definitely a good one there to stir some conversation. So, but we're going to head now to the focus story. As we mentioned there at the top, there's a new report about scientists creating human eggs in a lab. What could possibly go wrong here? So give me the details on this one.
Yeah, so scientists at the Oregon Health and Science University in Oregon successfully converted human skin cell nuclei into functional egg-like cells in a lab. So they're literally growing human cells in a petri dish in a laboratory. And more than that, I think this, Dan, is what is so concerning, is the scientists there fertilized 82 of these lab engineered eggs with sperm. Now, only about 9% of them actually reached the stage of early embryonic development. And then ultimately, those cells didn't make it much further after that entry level of embryonic development, and they died. But that should be incredibly concerning, because as Christians, right, we believe that life begins at conception. Well, whether lab grown in a petri dish or in the human body the way God intended it, those cells were fertilized, right? So those are lives. 9% of those cells successfully were fertilized and then died. So those are human lives that were sacrificed at the altar of scientific research. And that should be concerning. And I know we'll get into more of that here in a minute, but that is kind of just an over-the-top view of what's happening.
So how's the media been covering this?
Yeah, well, as you might imagine, a lot of the media, NPR and others, are kind of fawning over this story as just this great breakthrough in development. Now, they did note, toward the end of the article at NPR, for example, that there are some ethical questions. Like, no kidding, there are some ethical and moral questions. But one of the things that they led with, which I think is just a sign of where we are culturally, is people who are struggling with infertility now have this option. Okay, I can get behind being compassionate toward women who are struggling with infertility. They want to have children, and they've exhausted a lot of options. Maybe I have some ethical concerns about it, but sure, I can understand this being a potential option down the line. But the other thing that they say in their report is, and also gay men who are in relationships, they can now create a human being using their own genetic material, just the two of their genetic material, because we can create a lab-grown egg and then use sperm only from their genetic material. So that should be just deeply concerning to any believer who understands the value of human life and how it ought to come about.
So what are some of the theological concerns here? And I mean, there's a lot there, because I mean, if it's a lab grown egg, I mean, is this fully human? I mean, I have questions, but
yeah,
what are the theological concerns?
Yeah, there are a ton of questions, and the scientists did say this is just a proof of concept, is what one of them called it. And so this is just showing that we can do it. They said it's about a decade from ever actually even being considered a potential viable option for creating human life, because it does bring up those issues. Dan, are we creating children in the Twilight Zone where they're not actually human beings? They're just like clones, if you like, they're mimicking human beings. Anyway, I think that raises a ton of scary questions. But of course, you go to the sanctity of human life. That's the first one. Life begins at conception. And even if these kids were completely lab grown, I mean, it's a new frontier, but I guess, as we said at the top, it's still human life, and they're being discarded in the name of science. That ought to be concerning. Of course, playing God ought to be majorly concerning, right? God is the one who gives and takes away, and we as humans ought not to be so proud to think that it's on us to do that, because I think there are going to be some natural consequences to that. And then lastly, I'll say, and there are many other avenues and perspectives we could bring into this. I won't go down the whole laundry list of concerns, but one of the last big ones is that it just goes against the natural order that God created, right? God designed male and female to enter into one marriage for life. And that marriage was created with the intended purpose of procreating, bringing human beings into the world. And I think that with this new sexual revolution with transgenderism, we affirm people who are dealing with transgenderism rather than getting them the treatment, the spiritual guidance that they need. And now I view this much the same way, right? Rather than telling people, no, marriage is designed between one man and one woman for the purpose of procreation, we're saying, sure, you can have your same-sex marriage, and we'll even build an apparatus for you to have a child, and you never have to involve someone of the opposite sex. So, not only are we playing God, we're completely perverting God's intended design for marriage and relationship and procreation.
Yeah, and also when you're going this far in these lengths, like you just know that beyond trying to help someone with infertility, like there's going to be nefarious purpose here at some point down the line, regardless.
With
because it's a fallen world, right? Designer babies. And it's like, look at the adoption industry right now and how much need there is for adoption and how many kids and how quick we are to discard life. It's like, wait a minute, if you so badly want a baby, then how come you're not adopting and encouraging adopting? Because there are people getting pregnant all the time who apparently don't want their babies and they're having abortions. So how come we don't go down that road and really push that and promote a culture of life instead of creating petri dish babies, which I'm terrified to see what one of these babies would look like coming out. Are they going to have a soul? Like, what is going on here? I'm not a scientist, so I don't really know exactly what's going into that egg creation. But like you said, you're playing God with that. And man, sometimes you think, Jesus, I hope you're coming back sooner than later because things could be getting really weird down here.
Well, I think we're playing with fire with a situation like this, both, metaphorically and literally, and certainly spiritually, right? When we're willing to go down this road. And even other concerns that I've seen raised is, could this be like a black market, right? Somebody is selling, like, let me create a child using, let me find a celebrity or a famous person. I can mimic their makeup, and I can, maybe even somebody could down the line sell their DNA. It's like, well, I'm a successful guy, I have all these stereotypes for being attractive or successful or whatever. I'll sell some of my genetic material so that you can create a baby. Anyway, I think it just opens a Pandora's box of problems.
Yeah, really, really concerning for sure. And something we will keep on the radar, no doubt about it. As they said they're 10 years out. Well, we'll keep an eye on it and keep an eye on these shenanigans that they're dabbling with, because like you said, it's definitely playing with fire and playing God. And that is something we definitely do not want to be engaging in as humans. But appreciate you bringing that one to our attention on the podcast today, Trey. And we're going to go to the main thing now. A British man was arrested at his home in the middle of the night. What was his crime? It was posting on social media a meme criticizing Hamas and Islam. Wild stuff. CBN's Raj Nair and Billy Hallowell have the story on today's main thing.
Billy, man, what did you make of this?
Well, the first thing I made of it is this real curiosity about what in the world is happening with free speech in the UK. This has been an ongoing issue when it comes to abortion in buffer zones and arrest for silent praying. And now you have this thing where somebody has posted something on X. And as far as we know, we have this man's story, right? We have this video. Based on what we know, and there could always be details we don't, it seems incredibly troubling that somebody would be detained by the police and arrested. And you can hear the shock in this guy's voice as he's being arrested for a meme that he shared on X. The other part, outside of the shock about the free speech, is that it seems like, according to this man, and according to even the video snippet that we've seen, that the police seem most concerned about the comment about Hamas, right? Like, that seemed to be the thing that they flagged first. They even said, well, firstly, let's start with the meme. You posted a meme that said, F Hamas. And I'm thinking that it talks about Islam, it talks about other things. While none of that should be punishable by arrest, why is Hamas the first thing that the police seem to be focusing on?
And, as the young kids say these days, the UK really does seem, quote unquote, cooked. This is bad.
The UK
this is really bad. And if there's anyone in power in the UK, in Parliament or whatnot, watching this video, this is really, really Orwellian, dark, bad things. I mean, if you are arresting someone in England for posting a meme critical of anything, what? Like, I mean, this is like the foundational bedrock of Western society, is that you can vehemently disagree with someone, be offended, but you would defend their right to the death to say said things. And, you know, there's one of the, really famous interviews of all time was when Jordan Peterson was on, I forget what it was, like some British network. And he says, well, and the lady said, well, what about being offended? And Jordan Peterson had this like brilliant quote about, well, I'm risking being offended by being here, and produces viral clip. And I think the idea is it's okay to be offended. It's okay. Right. Listen, in the marketplace of ideas is where really brilliant ideas come out of, because they've been scrutinized, because they've been dissected, because they've been made fun of, right? The king has no pants. Like, that's the whole idea. If comedy, if memes can get you arrested in the United Kingdom, there is something deeply wrong going on in the UK. We've done a lot of stories about, the social unrest in the UK, people, very prominent British folks using the words like civil war. Keir Starmer, just the Prime Minister of the UK, we just heard about this a couple days ago, is now going to have this mandatory digital ID to work in the UK, which really doesn't really curb the problem. It's just more control. Everyone sees through the veneer. The UK is off in a bad way, Billy, and we need to be praying for our ally across the pond.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. It's not just the UK. We've talked about this. Obviously, we talked this week about what is happening in Nigeria. You have the persecution issue, and you have these lighter forms of persecution and free speech crackdowns like we're seeing in the UK. If you look in Finland, you've got Pavi Räsänen, a member of parliament who is up on charges at the Supreme Court of Finland right now over a tweet that she shared a few years ago, a Bible verse against homosexuality. She shared that Bible verse, and that literally landed her with charges. She is on her third trial over sharing traditional Christian beliefs. She wasn't malicious, and even if she was, which she wasn't, she just shared the verse. Even if she was, there is free speech to say what you want to say, or there should be. And so even in countries like Finland, where those rights, religious liberty and free speech should exist, you're seeing an erosion. And so this to me, and this is what's so important for all of us, right? We live in America. Our First Amendment is so important. There's a reason it's the First Amendment. It protects us on speech. It protects us on religious liberty. And we have to be so diligent to protect that. The fact that we had a football coach go all the way to the Supreme Court about praying on the 50-yard line, that we've had numerous cases that are very reminiscent and problematic of what we're seeing happen here, is proof to us that we need to make sure we are praying for this country, and also fighting in the legal system when we need to protect that First Amendment.
Amen to that, Billy. Let's be praying for the UK, because there is something really wrong going on over there. But as for now, God bless, my friend.
God bless.
All right, Raj, Billy, appreciate you breaking that one down on the podcast today. And that's going to leave us with time for one last thing.
Yeah, with all of these stories that are calling into question truth, and it can be difficult to parse what is true, I thought this verse from Psalms would be a good reminder. It's Psalms 25:5. It says, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long."
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, center yourself on Christ, and that is hopefully what our desires are each day, and the rest will kind of outflow. And it's easier said than done, because there's so many things to be distracted from with this world. But a great verse, Psalm 25:5, to marinate it on as we go about our day. Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. Until then, tune in to faithwire.com, cbnnews.com for more news from a Christian perspective. God bless. See you tomorrow.